integrity and governance costs a lot of money.
You can't just have a scapegoat, right? It has to be an overhaul of an entire tier.
The idea is to make sure that we deliver what we promise.
Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Amalina Kamal, and today we're delving into a pressing issue that strikes at the heart of governance: the controversy over alleged corruption and procurement irregularities within Malaysia's defence sector. Now, over the past few weeks, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission has stepped up when it comes to investigations into army procurement contracts, probing dozens of companies and seizing approximately 2.4 million in cash linked to the case. Now, the probe has reached high levels, with former military leaders and company directors being remanded as part of the inquiry. Now, these developments have sparked public debate over transparency, institutional integrity, and how best to perform procurement systems, and looking at the reforms as well when we manage billions in defence spending. Of course, this particular developments is not just something to take lightly, and who better to have here on set other than our two distinguished experts who are no strangers to the study and practice of governance. First up, of course, to my right, I have crisis management expert Nordin Abdullah. Welcome to Beyond the Headlines.
Great to be here, Melina.
Great to have you. And of course, next to Nordin, we have, who doesn't know Tan Sri, right? Tan Sri Sulaiman Mahbob, our public finance specialist, here to discuss procurement practices, best practice, and probably institutional reform suggestions in terms of what we can, I suppose, talk in Parliament, because it is supposed to take place in January.
Yes, indeed. Hi, thank you for inviting me, Amalina.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Well, I am glad to have both of you gentlemen here. But of course, I'm curious to know first, when we talk about institutional reform suggestion, right? I mean, we want to bring the idea or the discourse in hopes that, again, as I mentioned, at least someone somewhere can take it into hold. And we begin with the gravity, of course, of the MACC persecution here, where multiple firms and individuals have been, implicated. From a crisis management perspective, right, Nordin? Why are corruption allegations involving the military far more damaging than in any other sectors?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it comes down to the idea of the social contract and the question of trust. The armed forces, whether Malaysia or anywhere in the world, has a huge amount of trust. We trust that if anyone invades Malaysia or tries anything, that the Malaysian Armed Forces are there. Any time that is being brought into question, it becomes difficult for people to first grapple with. And of course, without commenting on any of the cases, we need to wait and see and deal with the facts. And we're still waiting to see some of the facts. And I think that's the key that we need to understand. And at the same time, there may be some good that comes out of this, that internal processes within the armed forces were able to reveal some of the things, some of the gaps. So it's not a zero-sum game here. What we're seeing is a process and a continual improvement. While it sounds very exciting, and we're all here on in the media, and everyone's talking about it on the media, this is an ongoing process.
Right. No, I mean, as Malaysians, I think we take very great pride in our military, right?
Yes.
But that's how we see it. On the finance aspect, right, Tan Sri, the defense ministry, or at least in defense itself sector, they don't necessarily get the highest sort of budget in terms of having to upgrade our equipment, our assets, upskilling, resource sort of, training in that sense. So when news such as this take place, it is quite saddening to know. But from the technical point of view, the facts of the cases could be an administrative oversight, right?
Yeah, my view is that this is a matter of public policy. and also public procurement processes and procedures. And I think if this thing happen in any ministry, of course it's worse if it's in Ministry of Defence, is that there is no appreciation for the spirits and objectives of those policies introduced by the government. Because public procurement is not new. Department expenditure is not new. We have already been spending a lot. There are open tenders and that sort of thing. And you must follow strict procedures. The check and balance that they must be observed. The idea is to make sure that we deliver what we promise. The government must deliver through the output. So when we budget, there's estimate of your input, estimate of your output, and also, for example, the outcome. The present is the outcome, and finally the impact as a whole. The moment this thing are broken down, then the objective of planning, objective for resource allocation to have a big impact on society is not there. So I think, then begins the question, do people appreciate those objectives? Do people concerned with spending, public spending, which is public money, taxpayers' money? It's very important, all the more if it happens in defence, I think.
Right. I mean, okay, just to follow up on that. So how do you think the non-transparent procurement practices, such as, the closed tenders and heavy reliance on intermediaries, actually distort competition, pricing, and value for money here? I mean, since we're really talking about this, right?
I mean, I believe in open tender, but there are some areas where we allow. For example, when you want to have some closed tender, for example, one of which is defence, but it must be cautiously, guarded so that it wouldn't be abused. And also the other areas will involve intellectual property. When you get a person who designed it, invent it or innovate the sort of thing, be given to say, the first to say first of refusal. Then you go for another one. So then it becomes open. Otherwise, it can be closed tender. But in this context of defence, it's always been there, especially in the area, for example, where we want to guard our confidentiality. We don't tell the world, I want to have this website, sort of thing, open tender, that sort of thing. But while we're allowing it, I think there must be rigorous internal standards to make sure that they are being observed. If in standard contract you just have a technical committee, a financial committee, the Secretary General or the Minister may have another one or two committee make it more rigorous. It can be done. So within the procedures of the Secretary General, otherwise just financial, all right, you meet standard financial, the other one technical mean. But if it involves very important, the privilege given to you must be appreciated. Privilege given to you that it is a closed standard must be appreciated and guarded, jealously, all the more from defence, because they're talking about security.
Right.
So that being the case to me, this is very important that we maintain that standard of secrecy, maybe confidentiality for defence. I do believe that, but be rigorously, guarded and respected. The other thing, for other sectors, I'll be entirely different. I believe in open tender, because
declarations as well.
Because if it is open tender, you get competitive pricing, and therefore there's no rent seeking. When there's no rent seeking, and definitely I think the society gets better outcome, better result. For other, but come to defence, I do allow
some
closed
level
standards.
of non-disclosure.
Yes, but must have strict standards. Maintained by the Secretary General or the Minister.
But that level of strict standards really goes back to practice, right? But what if the system itself is already rigged with a certain sort of culture that does not allow individuals, or at least, I suppose, the ethicality of a standard procurement process to take place within the confines of certain SOPs to be well? I mean.
Well, I think the first step is to understand what is critical and what is not critical.
Correct.
You can make one argument: everything in the defence sector is critical. So but I think there are certain things that you can take off the shelf and take off the table in that question of criticality. But the question now is how much information is going to flow into the public, because it's not just information that goes into the Malaysian media. This is everyone in the world can now get this information. Yes, we know how much Malaysia spends on an annual basis, but the breakdown of that information, even the amount of alleged leakages coming out of this recent stuff, is all information that adversaries to Malaysia can now use against us. And it doesn't necessarily, doesn't mean nation states. The threat matrix has changed. We're dealing more with cyber issues. We're dealing more with terrorists. We're dealing more with even the armed forces are dealing with issues around smuggling and illegal fishing and all this. You don't realize how much work is done by the military. It's not just what you see on Merdeka Day parades. It's a lot more than that.
Yes.
So all this is information that now needs to be understood in the context of readiness.
Okay.
And if you take that understanding and then guard that information, Tan Sri, in a different way, you will then make different decisions. And it's a challenging area, because now you're going to say, we want transparency on one hand, at the same time, look, we don't need to tell these people all this information.
The other concern of the country is the level of integrity. So I was the first CEO of the Institute of Integrity Malaysia. We want to make a lot of improvement area as a culture of integrity, so that everyone respect integrity, everyone believes integrity, everyone has a culture of integrity. Maybe not through just enforcement of laws here and there, but it's in yourself. It's in yourself. It must, right from the education system, right? What more if you are in the service already? It must be in you. This is quite important. I think it sends a message. What happened to the objective of trying to promote a culture of integrity by the government and good governance?
I do agree, because in some contexts, what you might think as something that is maybe like bribery or something being corrupted might not necessarily be true to the next person or the person sitting next to you. But apart from just things that are black and white lah, if you langgar lampu merah or
Sure.
that's like clearly wrong. But for instance, if like there are certain life scenarios that that are just grey, and if you take it by the book, yes, you would think that that person is wrong in the eyes of the law. But there's also human compassion there. But anyway, in this particular case, especially when it comes to transferring of huge money and having to not basically spend on the right sort of asset, does beg the question of why, curiosity, because it is public finances. So the question here still remains, when does internal failure actually become institutional crisis if it's overlooked too long?
I should say that this is a matter of concern of all ministries, to make sure all levels of the staff, appreciate this concern and make sure that, reviewed often, and if there are some loopholes in there, you must make sure that they are being addressed. It's very important. Integrity is not just, a small matter. Even taking 1 cent maybe from the system is a question of integrity. That should be avoided at all costs. This is quite important. And if it happens in a system where we allow this thing, we condone such thing, then nothing stops us from there. I'm quite worried. It's a whole issue of integrity.
If I may continue, Tan Sri, integrity and governance costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of time.
Who would have think, right?
And it does. And it also takes time to build the expertise that you are able to understand this in a different manner.
The resilience, you mean? Yeah.
So now when we start to think about resilience, can an organization be hit by a scandal or a crisis, and can it then survive? It will come down to, did they follow procedures? Did they have a policy? Sometimes there's just not a policy in place, and then they had the policy, they had the procedures, but were the staff trained on the policies and procedures, and then did they do scenario planning around if this thing happens and that thing's happened? This can take days and months and years for people to learn. So, we have this famous saying, you can either have it fast, you can have it cheap, or this famous saying. The problem is integrity and governance takes time and it's expensive. But the cost of not getting it right is far deeper than the cost of spending the money today.
Right.
The problem, Tan Sri, is, and it comes down to budgeting again, because we're talking about budgeting. Do we have the foresight, the strategic foresight, to realize that a certain percentage of this budget now needs to go into deeper integrity training, more governance,
not just
more
technicality
standards.
stuff? Yes.
It's deep. It's hard, and it's not exciting at all.
Right.
I would say that many elements, for example, conflict of interest, is something very, very important. The other one is question transparency. You think something a small matter like transparency, but it does send a very important message. Transparency can control all those, unruly behavior kind of thing. And for example, in the area of, for example, conflict of interest, whatever you do, you must make sure there's some conflict of interest with you. You're holding very senior positions. It may affect your reputation, affect the country's reputation. And all the more you're talking about Islam in the country, and this thing, it's very bad.
With those sort of rhetoric in the background, doesn't necessarily help, right? Yeah. I mean, the MACC's scrutiny, or at least investigations against this particular alleged sort of like mismanagement of funds, is basically boiled down to opaque dealings and the whole situation with how an individual having to deal and navigate with isolated contracts. But we're not talking about that alone.
No.
We're actually talking about the bigger picture, right?
Bigger picture, yes.
The bigger picture. And the bigger picture here is that, going back to my question, how can we actually ensure that the system itself does not, rig the individual in question?
Please.
I mean, it's a really good question, simply because what is the current state of the current system, and are we optimizing the current system, or do we need to shift to a new system? And this is called system thinking. It's a very difficult area to get right, because we are currently dealing with a knee-jerk reaction. And I always like to say, it's in a crisis, everyone becomes an expert very quickly, because they have this benefit of 20/20 vision. Find me the expert who can tell you, look, in 5 years' time, you're going to have this problem, and if you don't solve it today, you're going to have this, and that's where you shift your system. The problem is, can you sell that solution now when you're trying to reduce costs? So it comes back to this
priorities,
priority and balancing act. So again, and Tan Sri, you mentioned it very correctly, it's about reputation. So when you start to realize that reputation now becomes a real asset, and if you care about this asset, you'll invest into it and you'll protect it. And it's the system and the process that protects the individual. And at the same time, you have to strengthen the individual. So it's from both ends of this candle which we're coming at.
Do you think the investigations are a bit too aggressive, though, because it's to the point whereby we see top military officials having to be, like forced leave, and then having to go through all this dance without having to address the current issue at hand, which is procurement, the processes of procurement right now, I mean, you just mentioned everything is a bit too buzzy.
Well, it's exciting. It's all the kind of things, but all investigations are forensic. So you're looking at something that's already happened. It's forensic for a reason, because it's only what has happened. And at the moment, we want rigorous investigation because we don't want misinformation.
Right.
If we get false information and false allegations, that destroys the names of the individuals and the organization that you then have to build back later. So let the investigations find the right information, and then you're dealing with the facts. And I think this is the biggest challenge. If you open up any one of the social media platforms, there's 1,000 different discussions going on. But how much facts have been released? And I think that comes back to my earlier point. What is going to be released is also highly sensitive from a defense perspective. So you need to kind of balance these two things. It's a very interesting problem that Malaysia is facing now.
If I'm in the service still, there's a public servant still on duty or whatever case that sort of thing, I'm worried. I'm worried because the message of the government doesn't reach the people. The objective, the whole spirit of the instruction, for example, respect the procedures, respect the processes, are not what we call internalized. As a matter of, for example, your duty as a matter of your belief. It's not that. I'm quite worried. what happened to all other ministries, like that. I'm quite worried. So I should begin to examine, for example, the courses for all my staff, for example. It's just talking about technical skill, or you need to understand this thing, the values. Have you been elected in? Because I was once the CEO of the National Institute of Integrity. The Prime Minister then, Abdullah, was asking, go and make sure that you inculcate the culture of integrity in all civil servants. It's very important.
Yeah.
I'm quite worried, no?
I mean, back then, probably people were trying to still understand what integrity meant, although it probably exists in our dictionary for ages, right?
Yeah.
But today, you cannot say that, this is not a concept that I find foreign to. I'm an alien to, right? Because you should be informed. I mean, it's the 21st century. We're talking about AI adoption already today. And unfortunately, we still have hiccups that are very archaic in that sense.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want to highlight something because Nordin, you did point it out to me, a particular study. Actually, it's on the procurement efficiency of our Air Force, basically, in terms of how it has fared. And interestingly enough, a lot of our efficiency gains actually depend heavily on capacity building and a knowledge transfer. Okay, but with that, a lot of the decision making are made by the mid-level senior officers, not even senior or top officers. So again, when we talk about this current issue or scenario of how we are managing assets and money and funds in this particular sector, you can't just have a scapegoat, right? It has to be an overhaul of an entire tier.
All levels.
Yeah.
I believe all from the the top brass and up to the lowest level. They should know their duty. They should know the responsibility. They should know the level of accountability. It's very important.
But is it too much though to be asking our mid-level commanders to be focusing on this? Should it be more dispersed? To some extent, they can't say no,
No.
right? They cannot say no. They have to do it. But if it's already set a certain way, the cartel-like behavior or the cartel sort of system is set a certain way, how do they move around? We're still on this predicament at the moment.
The policy side must be adhered to, must be respected by the top brass. There's a policy. Then you translate to various levels. What does it mean to you as a sergeant? What does it mean to you as a captain? What does it mean to you as a platoon commander? You must know, And that must be very clear. I'm sure Ministry of Defence is maybe, and talking general again, not a specific case, is that it's not new. It's not new. So this must be there.
Yeah. Procurement, efficiency improves most when relationships improve. And then when we talk about relationships improve, okay, how's your chain of command? How's the communication like?
Yeah.
So it's all that, right?
True.
But in terms of the broader, bigger economic implication, Nordin, maybe we can go to you.
Sure.
How can this spill over to other sectors, or at least Malaysia's GDP? I don't know.
Definitely. Well, when we talk about critical supply chains, and for me, this is one area that when we start to understand, Malaysia is part to play in critical supply chains. What are critical supply chains? They are supply chains that plug into critical assets, and in this case, military assets. So the question is, where will Malaysia specialize in the defense industries? Are we going to be a pure consumer of military assets? And
Which we are currently right now.
Currently, there is some production in Malaysia. There is some production in Malaysia. But the question is, where do we want to specialize and where do we want to become an expert in? So this starts to become a broader discussion. It's not just in the Ministry of Defence. This now becomes a discussion with MITI. And it becomes a more strategic question that say, Malaysia, we should do this. Is it also important that certain items, for example, like let's say artillery shells or bullets or these things that are quick to consume, does Malaysia need to have that capacity, or do we want to focus on now things have changed? The war in Russia and Ukraine have seen a massive increase in the use of drones. And Malaysia actually has a very strong drone sector. So do we leave the low value stuff and go to where the high value and the change in military thinking, military planning is going? So this is actually an exciting area where Malaysia can actually take a lead. So out of this crisis, we can actually find opportunity.
I'm quite concerned when you touch the topic of supply chain management. I was once chairman of MIDA, twice chairman of MIDA. Very good, because we want to locate many industry-based supply management, in terms of ecosystem industrialization, in terms of supply management, so that good high-quality products come here, that sort of thing. And this involves a lot of intellectual properties, and R&D. If people see that Malaysian cannot keep this R&D, this formula is very important for industry, they may reconsider, for example, moving the R&D headquarters, for example, especially, for example, into this area. I mean, looking at a broader area, because they got the R&D, because the formula is very important, patent, that sort of thing, very important.
I mean,
so these are the things, it's got implication. I'm quite worried,
And I think when we start to think about it in the entire supply chain, the purchasing process at the end user is the last mile. But if we had designed this entire industry to plug into this last mile, it actually makes it harder for anything to go wrong in this last mile.
Yeah, because everything has to be smooth.
Everybody knows this thing. So it's again, you go back to the word transparency. An industry that you don't want transparent is your defense industry. But at the same time, you want to have a successful industry rollout. So
TOT, transport technology.
Exactly, that's right. It's again, it's an opportunity now when you start to think about it for Malaysia to start to get certain things right, and it's not easy. I'm from Australia. We have huge discussions around what will be built in Australia and what won't be, even though it's discussed very openly. So it is an emotional topic as well, because jobs are at stake. And when you start to think about intellectual property jobs, these are high value jobs.
It is,
and
indeed, it is.
It's a very important area for us to get right.
If we are turning our attention and focusing on this sort of development or area of growth, right?
Yes.
But why do you think it's still lagging? Is it because we just do not know where to kind of put our focus in first, or are we still fulfilling mandates that are purely not necessarily acceptable today, just because the direction has changed?
If I may touch, it's a tough question. I mean, a few years ago, before the incidents on the Russia-Ukraine border, no one was thinking of drones the same way. Now, CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera have become the best marketing agents for every drone manufacturer in the world. The dynamic of conflict has changed. There's a lot more gray zone activity as well. So when you start to think of this, you need an organization that is highly responsive.
Okay.
So when we think about the ships that we've been building for quite some time, they're a platform, but what are you going to put on that platform? So how much more technology needs to go into those platforms, and what will change? So you need to design an industry today that will be responsive in 5 years' time, because that's how long it took. 2 or 3 years to build. I don't know, Tan Sri, how long does it take to build a factory? 2 or 3 years. So you designed it today, but the industry and the nature of conflict changed in that 5 years.
Right.
So it's quote unquote changing this procurement system is not as easy as, let's train our supply sergeants better. Yes, that can happen, but it's actually a whole organizational change.
Tan Sri, I mean, I do want to understand, what sort of structural weaknesses in Malaysia's current procurement system actually allow for such problems that we see today? I mean, just to spill over what Nordin mentioned earlier, right?
It's a very interesting question, because it puts a question now whether our procurement procedures, policies are adequate or not. Somebody got to examine that part, and that actually falls on the responsibility of Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
At the moment, you always have, for example, broad policy to have open tender, yeah? But certain areas we allow negotiated tender, received tender, that sort of thing, or deal one person, whoever the supplier is. But so it's very important that we just want to go beyond, for example, just two committee, the technical committee and the financial committee. If the two of them pass the decision, whatever it is, then you think it's adequate now? I don't know. And level of technical capability and competency that you want to bring into the technical committee, is that adequate? I don't know. And on financial side, there might be some more rigorous standard to make sure there's no leakages. The way you talked about just now, going to somebody's account, it's very, very dangerous. Well, this is a question of accountability.
Yeah.
So I think people at Ministry of Finance should assess the implications of whatever these things are happening now. Review the procurement system, recommend the policies and procedures, also check and balance, and also maybe not enough to have just a financial and technical committee, maybe one or two more, I don't know.
And in the defense sector in particular,
Yes.
any sort of suggestion that you'd like to introduce? Because I do understand that they do have a tribunal for asset acquisition. They go through those processes, but still, things slip through the cracks.
Well, I think we need a frequent review. Frequent review always, whether it's adequate or not. I'm not sure. If you just maybe the past 10 years working doesn't mean the 11th year is working to you don't know. If somebody got examined, and it must take somebody from outside to oversee. So you're happy, you think that you're comfortable with it, you don't want to change, but things are changing outside there in place. Products are changing, technology is changing.
What about the
Communication
technical
systems
experts?
Yeah?
What about the technical experts? The technical experts who suggest certain equipments, certain assets. I mean, because they still
I always
come
believe,
from
always
within.
go for second opinion.
Okay.
Nobody, even doctors go on your life, so go second opinion. Not sure? Second opinion.
Yeah.
Even our legal system, you go from one level of judgment to another. Have a legal. Nobody's decision is absolute.
Okay.
And talking about the nation's interest, go for second opinion. Pay
Well-
for it doesn't matter. Pay for it doesn't matter, but get professional advice.
Nordin, do you think having to bounce back from such a scandal is hard for institutions like the armed forces to be going into? I mean, because the external oversight that we have seen with MACC's rigorous sort of like investigation against the top leaders or top ranks here, it's like a no joke, right? And then I suppose this is something huge that will be discussed in the upcoming parliamentary sitting, the day one, right? Yeah, I mean, especially. What's the first course of action that needs to be taken?
Well, I think in terms of resilience, the armed forces actually are probably the most resilient organization that you'll have in any country, because they understand chain of command. So if any part of that chain is broken, they understand what needs to be done to move things up and down the chain of command. So in terms of resilience, I think the Malaysian armed forces will be fine, will be strong. The question is, for me, from a reputational perspective, how are you going to frame this? How are you going to discuss it in a respectful manner? We've got to imagine these are individuals, these are families, these are people who have wake up in the morning. We wake up in the morning and think, where are we going to have cappuccinos and lattes? Anyone in the Malaysian Armed Forces has to wake up in the morning and imagine, hey, I need to put my life on the line for people to enjoy that privilege. So there's still a huge amount of integrity within the Malaysian Armed Forces. By and large, I think it will be a stronger comeback, simply because they are able to now deal with this problem. It's whether you like it or not, it's in the public eye.
Okay.
So with the ability to deal with it and with the ability to understand it, we can now do the scenario planning for what needs to happen next. And that's about designing a sustainable future. And that's not a procurement thing, that's a strategy thing.
It's a crisis, or probably like a damage, PR sort of like approach.
No, I would say no. I wouldn't say PR approach. I would
Okay.
say the PR part is the thing that comes last.
Okay.
What I'm saying is now you can say, let's deal with the DNA of the organization. What needs to change and what needs to stay the same. Not everything has to change.
Right.
There are things that are working.
So what actually signals genuine accountability, and what is actually damage control, if you may?
Yeah. So I think we always talk about crisis management and greenwashing and whitewashing and all this kind of things. I don't think that's happening right now.
Okay.
I think people are seeing what is, again, going back to what are the facts, what needs to be fixed, and having that space to have that discussion. I think now what we need to find are the military experts within the organization and within the country that can now design a better future. So partly it could be people who have recently retired, the experts who are there. It could also be you may need other younger minds in what's happening with technology is may not be understood by someone like myself and Tan Sri, or maybe Tan Sri understands it better than me. But there's things that are happening that you need younger minds and younger ideas around. What's happening with AI, what's happening with cyber, is amazing. So all of that now needs to be put on the table. It's not just fixing procurement. Procurement is the thing that you do last, actually. It's once you've decided, if you plan first and then execute. And this is also a very military idea. There's a reason why, if you use the word campaign, this is a military term that we use in PR. You plan and execute.
Yeah.
What do you execute? You execute based on the objective that you're after. So now the question is, what is the objective of the Malaysian Armed Forces? That's the first question.
I mean, if you ask me, based on the last discussion with our former PAT, is to upgrade and having to ensure that all the individual units or divisions are able to work together cohesively and up. Because at the moment, our Air Forces are quite great, especially with their assets and everything. They're pretty good. Our Navy is a bit backdated, outdated as well.
Yes. my feeling is that let the the investigation do it now, and then while waiting for final result of the investigation, go ahead and look at how can be improved. It's happening now. The fact it happened, there must be some weaknesses in there, which we overlook some time back. Re-examine the thing, because implication on other things of the country we talk about, reputation, integrity, that sort of thing. And whether the same thing also happened other ministries, we don't know. Because it's just that this is defense, But maybe education, health, we don't know. They also purchase a lot of very expensive materials, like X-ray machine, MR, that sort of thing. So we got to examine this thing. And if we can plug a lot new measures, new rules and procedures, they must be done, then they must be done. We don't know. Many things are happening. Many things, this thing happened because we could have observed the same procedures that was happening maybe 5 to 10 years ago, but things have changed now. Things have changed now a lot.
But do you think major anti-bribery overhaul initiatives should be put in place to ensure that there's an actual reform
after a proper study? After proper study, I don't know the extent of it. I mean, to pass the judgment that what happened if I have another ministry, I don't know. I did not. But have a proper study, and maybe what happened in defense now maybe can have been observed, for many years, but nothing being taken and action being taken. That's something also must correct. Don't sit on it, because finally, it's a public taxpayers' money, public money,
How do you state your case in terms of, I'm just genuinely curious, how do you actually state your case better to have a bigger budget for the year from our executives? Tan Sri.
Now we're talking about just, not just you spend on people and part. These are input. That's output, just how many people we train. But the other part, the outcome. Then finally the impact on society as well. How much contribute to development? How much defense into development in the neighborhood? For example, what's the multiplier effect of the defense? Battalions located there. How does it happen in the neighborhood? That sort of thing. So we got to estimate. Defense, I think, is one important area that have been propagating. We must examine the linkages, the multiplier effects. What are the other things there? The spillover effect. It's very important because we have no war now. So what is the dividend that we get during the peace? So the dividend is basically a multiplier effect. The linkage of the domestic economy, the skill we train, the importation of new technology, for example, is something that should measure their performance in the context of peaceful times. You know, this is the way I see it. I'm a budget person also in the Ministry of Finance.
Because I do understand, I mean, we had you on the show previously, but we were looking at the Auditor General's report, but I'm not too sure which one. I think it was the end of the 2025. Anyway, but you were saying that, okay, because we were talking specifically about the defense sector in terms of the leakages. And a lot of people have this misconception that when you talk about defense, it's just about, you know, when you're out at your posting. But behind the scenes, these military officers, they have families, they have, let's say, quarters, and they have their own schools, they have their own, it's literally like their own bubble in a sense. So it's like a working government, you know, so it's like
it has got a lot of impact in the environment where it is located, because they come along with a big number of people, say 1 battalion per 800, for example. Then the housing, the schools, the education, the families, all the transport, it's all there. It's very important. They create a lot of ripple effect in the neighborhood.
Right.
It's contribute a lot to the society, but we don't know.
I've asked Tan Sri in terms of the reform sort of approach to ensure that there's no big scandals coming our way, especially with GE16 happening in just about a year or so.
Yes.
What must be done to ensure that, you know, this particular case is a turning point for us to be better Malaysians that really uphold integrity?
I think that coming back to the real question, and you mentioned it earlier, what is the best way to get improved budgets, is to better understand the threat. And what internal threats do we have and what external threats do we have? And once you've understood that, then you can understand what is the objective. Design the policies, the procedures. Again, it's a very in-depth process. It will take years. It won't be done before the next election, all of it, because it can't be done. It's never finished. So when you start to realize this work is never finished, you need to spend more money on governance. You need to spend more money on integrity. You do need to impart that knowledge on those people who need it most. But at the same time, and this is what happens in a lot of developed countries, those people who have finished their tour of duty or their time with the armed forces become highly valuable human assets. And I think that is the shift that if we can get that right, the armed forces now becomes this massive university of talent production that also protects us.
Yeah, and there's longevity there as well, right? And it's quite sustainable because, I mean, there is a question of like how our vets are doing. I mean, you know, how after they retire, how are they going to kind of integrate back to normal society? But actually, it's not that bleak, right? It's not that bleak. There's a great misconception because there's always a need for us as media practitioners having to go out and interview these veterans in terms of how are they going to reintegrate back with society? What's their source of income like going to be? So, you know.
I believe there's quite a few good studies done by the National Defence University on this, and I think they're publicly available as well. So I think from a positive perspective, people who are in the armed forces are highly motivated. You know, these are people you want on your team. You know, they know what they're doing. They understand the importance of getting something done on time. You know, these are great tools that the corporate sector can leverage off. So I think when we look at what can happen with the military and what can then spill over into the defense industries and other industries, I think it's a very positive position we can put ourselves in.
And Tan Sri,
I personally believe that so far, I think our soldiers and our people working in ministry, you know, they have discharged their duty to the country very honorably. I think we've got to respect that. I hope this particular is happening. It's just, you know, it's an isolated case. I hope so. Maybe it's just we forgot to look at the detail of this Kumar, but we should check it so that it doesn't move and spread around. But on the whole, I think soldiers and those armed forces, I think, have there are great potential to contribute to the country. The great human capital for us to tap the skill and to move the defense industry to higher level I think they can be the basis for talent management, the basis for human capital, where element of creativity, element innovation can be harnessed from them. But we've got to have strong program for them, strong program. But I think I don't question their loyalty to the country. I don't question their eagerness to support
Obviously.
the country.
No.
But let not this particular event, make them feel suddenly they are, being seen in a negative way by society as a whole.
Well, of course, to our audience, this particular discourse is not just about, I suppose, not just about contracts or compliance. I think towards the very end, we talked about a bigger hope that we have for our defense sector, and not just the sector itself, but the individuals that drive it and having to, I suppose, make a name for us, right? Because at the end of the day, it is about trust. It's about accountability, and it's about the standards that we expect from institutions such as this, right? So again, when we are met with scenarios such, that scandals and scenarios that are a bit underwhelming, it saddens us in that sense, right? Anyway, yes, this is the end of Beyond the Headlines. If you do like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get NSC Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news reports, the developments that we have discussed will be delivered to you. Now, once again, I'd like to thank our guests, Nordin, Abdullah. Thank you so much for being on Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you, Amalina. Pleasure.
Pleasure to have you, and I hope that this is not the last time, right?
No problem. I love the teh tarik downstairs. It's very good.
Oh, okay.
We'll
Teh
go.
tarik downstairs. I know we do have a Sky Cafe, but not like downstairs. You mean what, next door?
Yeah, somewhere just this area. I'll show you later. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
yeah. And
Thank
Tanshi,
you.
thank you so
Thank you
much
for
as well.
inviting me.
Tanshi Sulaiman,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you again.
And to our audience, follow us on our social media. We are everywhere. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, as well as TikTok. I'm Amalina Kamal, and we'll see you next week.